We're going to jump right in. I got a lot today. I had to cut some stuff from the first message. So if I get to talking fast, just nod like you got it, all right? Because there's a lot to cover. We've been talking about Jesus, and we talked last week about Jesus and money, the third most requested topic in this whole thing. We're jumping into Jesus and anxiety next week. That'll be a good one. Don't miss that one. Then we're going to talk about Jesus and contentment. But the second part of the Jesus and money talk is coming in the form of Jesus and generosity. Because we learned last week specifically that if we want to have a healthy financial plan according to Jesus, he gave us 8 teachings, but it can be summarized this way. We give, we save, then we live. Giving the first 10% is called the tithe. I believe that ought to be the baseline for every follower of Jesus through your local church is what we call the tithe. We talked about being radically generous or expanded generosity, which we'll touch on at the end, and what that means to give above and beyond the tithe. But then we have saving. We ought to save so that one day when we retire, we don't have to worry. If we don't have to vote on whether we lose in our Social Security benefits or not, we can vote on spiritual things that matter because we take care of our own families. That'll be the goal. Now, some things happen in life, I get it, but how good would it be? How much better off would we be, the church in America and our country be, if we were all self-sufficient when we were 60, 65 years old? So we talk about saving, long-term and short-term, with an emergency fund and then retirement. And then we said, then we can spend. And so I want you to know, like when we moved here in 2009, I had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. I had no idea what the church called Relevant would become, or who. I didn't see your faces. I didn't know anything. It was kind of a pipe dream. And I remember getting off the plane in 2009. I believe it was when I came. Julie had already moved here because I was transitioning a business and a church down there, trying to make sure she moved here to get a job, to get her family settled. And I was traveling back and forth every week. And I remember getting off a plane. I think this was the season. And I was walking through the airport, Terminal C, Hartsville, Jackson International Airport. If you've been there, it's psycho people all the time. It's like a city, a train, underground. It's basically New York in a building, okay? And so at the end of the day, I'm in Terminal C, and I'm walking through there, and something hit me, y'all. And I felt something. I grew up south of Atlanta. I love Atlanta. It's my home. I believe in all, but something hit me that God, in the middle of the chaos, and I believe God can drop a nugget in your heart wherever you're at. He put something in my heart and said, this is your city. And I said, well, yeah. It's one of those things like, duh, like I get it, I'm moving here, God. But like, no, he's like, these are your people. And in a moment, within seconds, to begin to just weep. And look, there's thousands of people around. You don't be crying in the airport, all right? People be like, what's wrong, sir? Just shut up. And then God goes, these are your people. Don't talk to them that way. So you go to the airport and you get there early enough, you can people watch, and you can be like, oh, like I was being people watched that day. And so I'm walking through and I begin to weep and go, God, it's overwhelming what he was calling us to do. And I never would have dreamed that little conversation I had with God. How was he said, you got to be willing to risk it all. And I said, God, whatever it takes. I didn't know the relational stress that I would go through over the next 9 years since then. I didn't know the emotional turmoil that it would have on me and my family. I didn't know some of the things that would happen. And I'm going to tell you what I didn't know. I didn't know how much daggum money it was going to cost me. Plain and simple. The financial responsibility that our family bore because we felt compelled to be generous was really, I look back and I think, how are we not poor today? Because we felt something toward God that said we got to do more. And so we have since that day, and we'll continue. My wife sits in this service. This will be the service where at the end of the day, we make a pledge toward For the Love, our intention pledge toward that for the next year. And at the end of the day, maybe you're watching online. You can go online and fill out a card. You can do that. We're all going to come together at the end, and we're going to once again say, God, we're going to be generous. And we're going to pave the way toward making a difference in this community and ultimately around the world. And what I told you last week, if you didn't get a chance to catch up on it, was if you just look at the sheer numbers of dollars that the average American spends, we're losing to our own debt. We're losing by based on the fact we're giving more interest to big banks. We're losing when it comes to how much we're spending on vacation. We're giving more on vacation than we already got. But thankfully, we're beating our coffee habits by a little bit. Like that's how the churches lack generosity. And then I hear people who just got back from Honduras tell us how little those people have, yet they're the happiest and most joyful people on the planet. And so I'm compelling you, I'm asking you, I'm believing that we'll come together and we'll all experience and feel what I felt in 2009, and maybe there'll be tears, maybe there'll be anxiety, maybe there'll be all the feelings that go with that, but you will say, God, this is bigger than us, and we are called to a place, we are called to a people, and we are called to our Savior to make a difference. And so that's what I'm going to compel you to do today. So get ready and listen intently because we got to go fast. Luke chapter 19, verse number 1. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. It says, a man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and he was wealthy. Pause right here for a second. Do y'all remember anybody grow up in church? If you didn't, please don't judge me right now. But you remember the song about Zacchaeus? Zacchaeus was a wee little man. Okay, if you know that song, please don't self-identify because I'm going to tell you that's why people left the church, because we had to sing songs like that growing up. So we sang songs, they had a lot of theology in them, but then we'd sing these songs, but we didn't really fully understand what they meant, did we? All I remember was a wee man and a sycamore tree. That's all I remembered. I don't know nothing else about the story. We is the main word in that whole song. That's all I can remember. If you're 9 years old and you're a boy and you sing we, you just think about all kinds of wee and pee and everything else. You don't think about Jesus. That's the way I grew up, and we sing all these weird songs, but there's some theology here. This man was a tax collector. He was representative of taking money from the Jewish people, supporting the Roman Empire, supporting the governments of today. And I pause right here for a minute on the issue of tax collection because if you've watched social media, we are in a debacle in our state over a governor's race, all right? Please don't say nothing. Because we've said enough on social media, casting bombs at the other side that didn't do anything but bringing division to a country. And there's hate all over our country and all over our state and all over our city and all over our world. And listen, I don't care which side you're on. What I'm trying to point out to you is if you are hardcore right or hardcore left or whatever in between, you have some emotions attached toward this thing. And this doesn't have any comparison to the emotion that people would have felt toward a tax collector. Because he was loyal to the government and to Rome and not to his own people. And so he's collecting taxes. And he was wealthy because he was collecting taxes. And so he wanted to see who Jesus was. But because he was short, where are all my short people at? Come on. Jesus loves all of us too. He could not see over the crowd. Some of y'all feel that way when the big tall people sit in front of y'all. Couldn't see over the crowd. And so it says he ran ahead and he climbed up a sycamore fig tree to see Jesus, and Jesus was coming that way. Now, here's what I want you to understand. There's some parallels to a salvation experience here, is that Jesus is always coming towards you if you will just make yourself available to him. That's what happens when we receive Christ, is that Jesus is coming our way. We have to do our part and welcome him in. And so this is what happened. You see the parallels, and ultimately you see a heart change that happens. When Jesus reached, it says, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house. Now, if you met Jesus for the first time and you were a tax collector, he's like, bro, I'm coming to your house. You're going to say, all right, just a second. Can I get it cleaned up? You know, maybe some of you might have to get rid of some stuff. Come on. So you see, this man goes, so he came down once and he welcomed him in gladly. I think this is interesting. How many times we feel like we got to get everything right before we welcome Jesus into our inner circle, into our heart, into our life? He said, come on. Now, you know Jesus knows this dude's mail. He's going to read his mail. He knows. And Zacchaeus knows. And it says, all the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be a guest of a sinner. Then it says, but Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord. Now, interesting, because the Bible says, if you confess me as the Lord, that's the salvation experience. So Jesus hasn't died yet at this moment. And so he sees him as Lord, meaning from God, the Messiah who's going to change the world. So he buys into what Jesus' teachings are, that he's the Son of God. And he says, look, Lord, here and now, I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Hit the pause button. We get to the end of a service. Let's pretend none of us are Christians. We don't follow Jesus with our life. We've just come, and all of a sudden, we've come in, and now we face this moment where we're going to receive Jesus in our life. And I say, if you'd like to receive Jesus into your life today, raise your hand. And everybody's like, oh, okay, I'll do it. And then you're like, okay, but let me tell you something. Hold it up real high. And if you're still with me at the end of this, you can keep it up. You got to give half of your possessions back to God. And anybody in your entire life you've ever cheated, you got to pay them back 4 times the amount. I think some people start scratching their face all the way down to their hand got back in their lap. Come on, you know what I'm talking about? We get nervous just by like, oh, we got to give up that. But here's a man who had an encounter with Jesus, listen to me, and it changed everything. And it went to the core of who he was in the heart. And he understood the generosity of Jesus. And when you understand the generosity of Jesus, you don't live with closed hands. And so, Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man, talking about Jesus, did not come but to seek and to save that which was lost. There is a direct correlation between your heart and your money. And for some of us, we know where our heart is. It's on ourself, because that's all we spend money on is ourself. And Jesus he was rich, but became poor so that in our poverty we might become rich through a relationship with him. Kent Hughes, who's a theological professor at Westminster Theological Seminary, he has some incredible quotes about the early church, and he talks about Luke's writings. I just want to give you a couple of things I just want to read you. He said, there's a very intentional theology of generosity in the Gospel of Luke in particular. And the point, as Hughes captures it, is generosity is a sign of a regenerate soul. In other words, when Jesus changes you and you understand how much he gave for you, you become generous. So if we're not generous, maybe we don't understand what Jesus did for us. And it says, there is no such thing as a Christian Scrooge, he says. We may know some Scrooges who claim to be Christians, but I don't think you can claim to really know Christ and be a stingy person. The gospel opens our soul, and with it, he says, our hands. He says the issue of giving sacrificially, quote, Christians ought to give in such a way that there are things that we forego, coffee and vacation sometimes, coffee and your golf or whatever, that new car, he says, that vacation, in order that we may be generous. And then he says this, ending, Christianity encompasses all of our life. Not just Sunday morning, not just a portion. And here's the thing. If you look at the early New Testament church, after Jesus dies, you will see this thread of generosity and compassion throughout the way they lived. And this is where our For the Love initiative comes from. So let's look at the early church, Acts chapter number 2. Again, Luke writes the book of Acts. Peter has stood up. He's preached the gospel after Jesus' burial and resurrection, and Jesus has ascended into heaven, and now he preaches the message of the resurrection. 3,000 people come to know Christ. The whole day of Pentecost happens, and all the Jewish people are coming to know Christ. And he says, then they gathered together, and they got to meet together, and Luke tells us all the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. This is 30 verses later. This is not years later. This is, they go, Jesus saved us. What are we going to do for other people? That's exactly what they did. Immediately, they went open heart, open hand. And the New Testament church began to meet in their temple, in the little courtyards between their homes for small group discussion. In fact, the Bible tells us in Acts 2, right before this, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the breaking of bread and the prayer. And so what they would do is the teachers and the apostles would teach. They would go into their groups and discuss that in the theology and say, what is it that we're supposed to do because of that? That's exactly the model that we have in our church. Is we speak on topics and messages and dig into the content of the scriptures. You go home into your small groups. You discuss it, and the goal is to move you to action. But they were so compelled to be moved to action, they would meet in the little courtyards in their little villages, and the gospel began to grow, and their church, their group would begin to grow because they would care for the people right there in their own little village and community. They would care for the sick. They would take those orphans into their home. They would care for widows. They would help those in poverty. In fact, those that were maybe had leprosy that had been cast out, they welcomed them back in, because in that culture, a leper was seen as unclean and unfit and the epitome of sin, and they welcomed them in. And because of that, the gospel, the good news about Jesus and the resurrection, spread to the entire world because of their behavior. And then about 300 years later, the gospel has affected the whole world, and it's now infiltrating Rome and the Roman Empire. And there's an emperor by the name of Julian the Apostate, which means he had an apostate heart, anti-God. In 4th century, he believed in paganism, somewhere around 360 AD. And so he launches this campaign to institute pagan charities in an effort to match, ready for this, the generosity of the Christians. Because he realizes the government is not doing near what the church is doing. We got a little backwards today, don't we? We go wallow in our income as believers, and we live lavish lifestyles. I'm just speaking generally, don't be offended. We lavish our lifestyles. We pay a lot of interest and debt and everything else and go drink our coffee and go, government, take care of the poor. That's not the way the New Testament church functioned. Government, care for everybody and their psychology and their mental struggles and all the different things that go on. No. It's the church's responsibility. Take care of the special needs. Take care of the single moms. No, it's not the government's job. It's the church's job. And so this emperor of Rome was frustrated because he's like, the church is outdoing us. And so he decides that he's going to launch all these charities to try to match the generosity of the Christians. And he complained in a letter. Ultimately, he wrote a letter to the high priest of Galatia in 362 AD. And he said that they need to equal the virtues of Christians because the recent generosity and the Christian growth can't come because of their generosity. And he said this, it come because of their moral character, even if they pretended to be good, and by their benevolence towards strangers. He said that's why they're taking over the world. In another letter to a different priest in that day, he wrote, I think that when the poor happened to be neglected and overlooked by the priests, those Galileans, he says, those Jewish people or those people who decided to follow Jesus observed this and devoted themselves to benevolence. He says those Galileans supported not only their poor, but ours as well. Everyone can see that our people lack an aid from us. So they didn't go to the polls to vote for the government to do things to help their country and community. They actually mobilized the people of God and they did it. And so then he writes that he said, I hate the Galileans, but he also recognized that the charities that were organized under Rome and under the government of that day were not making near as big of a difference. And so he tries his best to launch these pagan charities to match what the church is doing, but it was too late. Because everybody knew about what Christians and followers of Jesus believed. And everybody knew about the impact they were making. Because the foundational message of the Christian church was generosity and compassion. Because Jesus had compassion on us, so much so that he gave his life for us. And so it can be summed up this way for you and I today, that we are to do good toward those who can't and won't do anything good for you. They can't and they won't do anything good for you. It's easy to be generous with loved ones. It's your birthday, we'll buy you a $300 Xbox. That's fun. It feels good when you're kid. It's much harder to be generous when there's no recognition. You don't get a trophy. You don't get a plaque. Nobody gives you a shout out on social media. Nobody even knows. You just do it because you're supposed to. Because you're like Christ. And so then, that brings me to how should we give? If we're going to give, because let's be honest, there are no shortages of people asking for your money. How many GoFundMes are started this week? People, can you help me start a GoFundMe for my dog having surgery? Can you help me start a GoFundMe to find my long-lost relatives? Here's the answer, no. That's a waste of my money. I want to be a part of a cause bigger than myself. I don't want to be a part of something that has, so how do we balance what we should and shouldn't give to? Well, let me tell you, there's two types of basic giving. Here we go. There's what we call intervention giving. Intervention giving. This is where I give directly to something that will help immediately. So my 11-year-old's in here, my youngest just turned 7, and let me tell you something. If I were to call a family up on stage today who just lost their home in a fire and they lost everything, and I said, we're going to take up an offering to help, my kids would be like, I want to be a part of that. Because I can feel it. It's emotional, and it helps immediately. The problem is there's a second type of giving called prevention giving. This is giving a percentage of my income to a cause that I believe in. And so we said in our church series, Jesus and the Church, we said, my cause is Christ and his cause is the church. And so my cause is his cause. And so as believers, that's why we give generously through our local church to help our community and ultimately so people can come to know Christ around the world. So here's the difference in the two. Intervention giving is emotional and the results are measurable. So today we need to raise $50,000 toward and everybody goes, we did it. Woo, we put them in a house next week. Everything feels good. Wow. Prevention giving is neither emotional nor measurable, but is far superior. And let me tell you what I mean. It takes more discipline and you don't get to feel always the effects of your generosity. So If I were to call a family, let's just pretend up on stage, and I were to say, okay, here's a man, here's a wife, here's 4 kids. This man has some internal struggles nobody knows about. He's about ready to walk away from his wife. But if we can get him help, you may not even know this, but if we can get him help and get him, he can receive Christ into his life and start down a journey toward wholeness. He'll be faithful to his wife. His kids won't be fatherless, and his wife won't be raising 4 kids in poverty. That's what we call prevention giving. You don't feel it. You don't know it. Listen, at Relevant Church, I look around, and one of the things that I'm most proud of is the amount of men that attend church here on Sunday morning. Like I look around and go, man, forever 80% of the work in churches have been done by females, and I'm so glad that we got men stepping up and leading the way and paving the way, and every wife in the room that has a husband serving and being involved and leading the way is super excited about that as well. And so men are stepping. You have no idea. I have no idea how much my generosity or your generosity, how many men have stayed faithful to their wives, who have gotten help and gotten their marriage back on track and not left their kids and not left their wife. That's prevention giving. So it's easy to go help a single mom and all that. We'll do those things. That's intervention giving. But how many single moms did we prevent? We don't know. And we may never know until we get to heaven. And that's the difference in the two. And I think both are important. And so that's why we launched something called For the Love last year. It simply stands for the love of the lonely, L, the O, the overwhelmed, the V, the vulnerable, the E, the empty. I know that was really fast, okay? That's why you see a big light wall up out there, because we got lights coming in on the wall. As you are generous, those lights begin to light up. Because there's a goal that in mind that we have a 2-year initiative, 2-year vision to do all kinds of things. And I'm about to tell you some of the things that we've done already in year number 1. 1 year ago, I stood up and shared the initial For the Love vision. Since that time, in 1 year, let me tell you something. Usually a vision takes years to get off the ground. When I sit down with a team from Honduras, I realize it's taking root in the hearts and lives of some of our people. In 1 year, let me run over some things that we've been able to accomplish through your generosity. We talked about foster care and adoption, because the scriptures teach that religion that is pure is one that cares for orphans and widows. And so since last year, we've had 10 families go through foster care training, and we've had 10 placements of foster care children in our church. 10. What if that doubled next year? What if in the next 5 years it continued and we had 50 or 100 kids, because our church understood what it meant to care for orphans and widows? We talked about helping those who are gone through divorce or lost loved ones and getting wholeness from those. And so we launched Grief Share and Celebrate and Divorce Care. And we've seen 16 people go through divorce care, 21 people go through Grief Share and begin to find wholeness from the pain and the hurt. Because here's the thing, my wife read a book recently, and it blew my mind, because we've talked about this a lot. Do you know that it's impossible to be spiritually mature unless you're emotionally mature? And the reason we have so many shallow Christians is because we got so many hurting Christians. So what we want to do is help people find wholeness and strength in their life, so that when they worship Jesus, they're worshiping with everything they have, not out of this element of like not knowing what tomorrow may hold, because so we're trying to get people whole and following Jesus all at the same time. We started something called Life's Healing Choices, an extension of Celebrate Recovery. We've had 74 people participate in this last year. These are people who've been hurt in their life. They got habits that they need to get rid of. They got hang-ups. Maybe they got unforgiveness in their heart. Maybe somebody walked out and they haven't dealt with something from their childhood, or maybe they have an addiction of some sort and they've come through. And I have personally spoken with at least a half a dozen people in the last 2 months that have told me, I was on meth for 5 years. I was on heroin for 10 years. I'm clean now for 5 months, 6 months. I've been clean for 3 months. I'm now in a small group. I've received Christ. I've gotten baptized. And you know where it started? Not here on a Sunday morning, but in this particular breakout that we do throughout the week. 14 leaders have trained over the year to get ready to launch the full-fledged program next year. We added something called mentoring and life coaching, and in the next few months, you'll hear more about ways you can get involved in mentoring and life coaching. We've had people that come in, and we didn't realize this when we launched this, but they may not need full-fledged counseling, but they're going through a season of life where, hey, I've lost a job and I need somebody to help coach me through this. I need help in my financial situation. I need somebody to help coach me through this. And I do some mentoring. 28 different individuals have gone through that in the last year. Now, keep in mind, when we started this a year ago, we had none of these programs in place, nothing. And so we've been able to launch these things, but also see people connect. When it comes to special needs, we talk about special needs in our community being very vulnerable because maybe they don't have the same opportunities that a lot of other people and children have. And then we also have families. The entire special needs families are overwhelmed at raising, so they need a support system because they're raising children with special needs. And so we have a special needs that meets in our school, and literally it's an investment. All we do is it's very minimal. They just pay to turn the lights on. In fact, we make an investment far beyond this building because we want to be generous back to them. And so they meet here, and I talked to Lori this past week. Lori's going to be here in December telling you a little bit about what's happening in the school. But basically, she tells me if they had more space, they could double. Why? We can't give them, we don't have more space. The only way we can give more space is once this building's built down here, this whole end becomes available. It's more space. And so yet again, as we build a building, we're making more room for more people to connect. On Thursday nights during our worship experience, there's not a single room in this building that's not maxed to capacity or has something going on in it. And we're out of space just on Thursday nights because of all the other things that are meeting here. And so we also do outreach like Tent or Treat, things of that nature to partner with special needs families, help with Our World Hope Park. We've done a lot of different things out there to help with landscaping and different things of that nature. When it comes to poverty, we partner with Caring for a Cause through something called Backpack Buddies. And you personally, our church fed over 200 kids over the weekend this past year. And what they will do is they'll come in on a Friday at school and get a backpack full of non-perishable food items, take it home and eat for the weekend, bring it back on Monday, and they can get it again on Friday because if they don't have that, they likely don't eat over the weekend because they're on free lunch throughout the week. Over 1,200 kids in Henry County alone are in poverty and homelessness is rampant. And so you've been able to be a part of that. We've done homeless outreach in various ways. We got one coming up for poverty coming up in December through, last year we did bikes for a cause through Caring for a Cause here, and we gave out several hundred bikes. We're doing that in Griffin. We're actually taking that event to Griffin in December, on December 7th and 8th. You can sign up on your way out to be a part of that. We're also doing something here in Henry County a little different to help families in poverty, to give them a great Christmas, but beyond just giving them presents, to help them get back on their feet and have a great December. We were able to partner in the past. We're doing it again. We did For the Love Days where we helped single moms, widows, and elderly. We went in and took care of some situations around their house and did some projects around their house to get their house back up to speed, or maybe they had damage, or maybe they need some work done. Let me tell you something that's forgotten in our culture. Are you ready for this? The elderly. It's easy to see children who have needs. It's easy to see children who are sad. Do you know how many elderly people who've lost someone, who are lonely, sitting alone at home, and we have just as much of a responsibility to care for and love them? So we did through the For the Love initiative. Sex trafficking, we have in January another drive coming up for this, but 2.5 months from today, on a Sunday, in our city, will be the single biggest sex trafficking weekend in the history of the world when the Super Bowl comes to Atlanta. In one city. Our city. These are my people. These are your people. Like the girl who was found about 6 months ago in Savannah that had taken missing from Henry County and had been sex trafficked. We hosted a human trafficking forum, and we did kits for over 200 girls being rescued out of sex trafficking, and they would sit in the police station with no clothes on or whatever because they were basically drug out of the hotel room or drug out in a sting, and they had no dignity. So you provided kits to help clothe them and keep them warm and get them feeling a little bit of dignity. Over 200. Those went to the FBI, the GBI. Those went all over the state of Georgia through your generosity. They'd done drives before, and they told us that was the largest drive that we'd ever done through our church. We partnered with Gigi's House, who's taken these young ladies, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, coming out of sex trafficking, and they take them not just to get them on their feet for 6 months, but if it's 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, it does not matter. Many of you are partnering with them, you're helping them, you're serving them, but we help resource them. We've done some work at their house. We give to them financially to help do something that we're not equipped to do because of your generosity, for the love of the vulnerable. Brokenness. And then we just got back from Honduras, and I won't take a lot of time here because I just shared some thoughts with you, but 195 families, 550 people given medical care, had fun and took care of and are going to begin sponsoring 62 foster kids, gave them food and medical supplies. And so look, in 1 year, last year it just simply said, for the love of the lonely, overwhelmed, be vulnerable, empty, with nothing. In 1 year, in addition to everything that happens here on a Sunday and every service and all the people who've received Christ and got baptized, we've been able to start something, and I think we're off to a pretty strong start. So, well, there you go. I just found out that you understand, like, for about $1,000 a year in Honduras, there's a lot of places that don't have water, and if they do have water, they can't drink the water because they have parasites if they drink it. And so they have to have a certain medication to counteract the parasites. For $1,000, give or take, a year, we can provide the medication for an entire village to be able to drink water by giving them the vitamins and the anti-parasite medicine, so now they can actually drink water ongoing throughout their day. $1,000. Listen, what did we say last week? The average American spends $1,100 a year in coffee. You see where the priorities are. I can give a village the ability to drink water for the price that I spend on my coffee, the average Christian. I want you to take a look real quickly at just a story, about 4-minute video here. You can see what happened in Honduras the last couple weeks. But this team, I am so proud of this team and what they did. Their heart is there. And I'm going to tell you, if you run into one of them, you might just catch something. It's called a passion. You might just get drugged to Honduras next year. Because when I ask them who's going back next year, every single one of them raise their hand. Because I'm telling you, when you do, then sometimes you feel. And so now their heart is connected with what it literally means to have love for people who are broken and who are hurting. Take a look at this.
We made it here safely, Honduras, and got here to the compound. Staying in a couple compounds over there to my right. We just got done setting up a tent that we're going to use for our medical missions.
You've heard of supplies, you've heard of what we're doing, but we wanted to show you that in action. So right behind me, everyone is getting these things together. They are packing the vitamins, packing the kits to give out each place we go. So, and they're killing it, and we're getting a lot done.
I'm expecting for God to show up big and to wreck me in the best of ways, really. And I really just want to be the hands and feet of God here, and I really pray that He opens my heart to what's out here.
I'm really excited for the people because I know what they go through when it comes to seeing doctors and getting medicine. So right now, I'm just really excited for them.
Today, Relevant Church is here in San Manuel, which is about 15 minutes from our main campus. And today, the team is doing a medical ministry here. And it really provides support for the church. It's allowing the church to do an outreach event, which will bring people to the church. But very specifically, the team is providing some medical care to a lot of people in this community that just would not be able to receive the medical care, and especially they would not be able to afford the medicines that the team is simply providing free of charge.
That's what it's for the love of God's people. This is how we can give back. This is how we can reach more people, is by showing them the love that Jesus has showed us and being able to reach them and maybe connect them with the local church. Maybe get them, maybe some of these people that are coming up weren't involved in the church until now, and to be able to make that connection for this pastor so that he can reach his people better is beyond words. There's nothing more we can do for God's kingdom than that.
I mean, you come down with a lot of preconceived ideas of the way it will be, but then you put a face with what how you're ministering to them, and what you see is the heart seems to be growing with a sense of compassion. And that's why here in the team house at night, you hear the team talking about the experiences of the day and how they're really connecting with the people.
We will take that back. We will tell them that Honduras is not this hostile place that it's been made out to be in our minds, that it's just regular people that love God and that just need some help.
These people are not what we see on Facebook or on TV. They're the most genuine, loving, kind people I've ever experienced. The children come up and hug us, and I feel like we're meeting a physical need, but they're giving us so much more.
We were able to see over 550 people over the last 3.5 days, but there's so many more here that need attention, that need groups to come and to love on them and show them Christ. You know, Christ compels us to come and do these things. He says to take care of the widowed, the orphaned, the people that don't have anything. And that's what at our church For the Love means. It means we take care of the lonely, the oppressed, the vulnerable, and the empty. And we have a saying in our church that we will do everything short of sin to reach those people far from God. And those people are far from God. They just don't know that there's a God that loves them. And if there's not groups that come and love on people and take care of a need, to help break down walls so that someone can tell them about Jesus. So I pray that you are compelled after watching this video to be able to do something about it, whether it's give, whether it's come, whether it's just support someone who's wanting to come and make a difference. It all adds up. It all helps, and there's no wrong answer to helping this community.
So thank you guys to all you who gave, all you who served. That kind of stuff is not possible without your generosity. They sacrifice time and energy and money and resources to go, but your generosity helps make us be able to do the things, to buy all the supplies, to send people over, to do some of those things. And so I want you to take this out real quickly, and I want to read you the passage of Scripture that's on the blue side of this, the inside of this. If you'll open it up. This is a picture of a young man who received Christ in our church. I don't have time to go to the whole description. He's getting baptized there, and his little buddy who's in a small group is clapping along the way. That's the same image that's on that Connection Center wall out there. His little buddy got baptized this past year. I don't have time to go into the stories, but both of those young men represent incredible stories of families in our church, of special needs, of loss and grief, and how God has just done some incredible things in their life, and they're all serving today. But over the top of that, it says this, and this is what Paul writes to the church at Corinth in 2 Corinthians chapter number 8. I don't like this passage, y'all. You ever read a Bible verse you don't like? Don't lie. I don't like this passage. It says this, but since you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in the love that we have kindled in you, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. Okay? Then he says, I'm not commanding you, this is the part I don't like, but I want to test the sincerity of your love. Then it goes on to say, by comparing it with the earnestness of others. Whoa. That's cool if I'm comparing myself to other Americans. Because I know how my wife and I try to model our generosity. But what if I'm comparing it to people in other countries who give out of poverty? In fact, the way Paul is writing here, he says the Macedonian churches were plagued with poverty, and out of their poverty welled up rich generosity. And he says, you, church at Corinth, you're wealthy. I'm going to test the sincerity of your love by comparing it to what the churches at Macedonia did. I don't like that. And you don't either, if you're honest. Because what that means is we should do more, doesn't it? That passage alone tells me I still don't understand generosity the way I need to, no matter how much we give. And here's why that's important, verse 9. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich. David Mathis on the Desiring God blog, which is John Piper's blog, he says, one of the effects of the gospel going deeper into our souls is that it frees our fingers to loosen the grasp on our goods. Generosity is one of the greatest evidences of truly being a Christian. I'll close with this passage and give you two thoughts, and then we're going to respond. Acts chapter 20. In everything I did, I showed you that by this kind of hard work, we must help the weak. Luke's writing, remembering the words that Jesus spoke himself, and here's what he said. It is more blessed to give than it is to receive. I think when we see that passage, sometimes we misinterpret that passage. It's better for us to give than receive something from someone else. But many of us, we receive stuff from ourselves, don't we? Every day we buy stuff for ourselves and receive stuff for ourselves. It's a whole lot more blessed to give than it is to buy yourself something. And he says this, it is more blessed to give than receive. Let me just give you two results of generosity real quickly. This is gold. more joy, more peace. If you don't believe me, go to Honduras, or go to third world countries and watch how much joy they have when they don't have nothing else. I can show you a whole bunch of pictures that I don't have time to. From elderly people getting glasses and seeing the first time, to a man who came and saw a bus of people going through, and they'll scroll through these real quickly, but through a bus, he saw the Christian name on the bus, and he said, if Christians are here, then they must be coming to help. And so he followed the bus all the way to the little village because he knew that Christians were there. And so as you give today, or as you plan to give today, what we're going to do is we're going to take this card and we're going to fill this out. We're going to drop it in buckets. Our ushers are going to go ahead and prepare across the front. We're going to give a little differently. And you can come to Relevant Church, and if you don't pay attention really well, we can take up an offering at the end, and you won't even realize we've done it because it's not high pressure. We just believe the people of God ought to be generous. So we pass the buckets. It's real quick at the end, but today we're going to do something a little different. They're going to take buckets and align the stage, and as a sign of our commitment, we're going to step out of our seats, and we're going to bring our intention card and drop it in the bucket. Here's how you're supposed to fill it out. I'm going to give you one example. You are smart people. You can figure this out from here. Let's say you make $50,000 and you're a tither. You normally give $5,000 in a year. That's what you normally give in a year. This will start December 1 and go through the end of November next year. My expanded generosity for the love. Say I want to give more than 10%. I'm going to give 15%, which is an additional $2,500. I'm going to give that much. And then I want to give something out of my stored assets. Maybe you have a tax return, or maybe you have a Christmas bonus, or maybe you own a business. I thank God for the businessmen in our church and businesswomen in our church who give radically at the end of the year because you are what helps us plan for the next year. I want to say a huge thank you, but maybe you don't. Maybe you just can sell some stuff, have a yard sale, and you want to give out of your stored assets and say, I'm going to give $5,000 from that. It's a total of $12,500. That would be your generosity from December 1 to December 1 of next year toward For the Love. It goes toward all the things we've talked about. This new expansion that we're adding, more area for kids' environments to redo this in, all of those things. And then in December 2nd, we start bringing our For the Love intentions. We're a big offering on that day, and we ask people to bring as much as you can, as fast as you can, so we can plan. That's all. Real simple. My family, I promise you, has always and will continue to lead the way in this. And so I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to pray over this, and I'm going to ask you to fill this out. Maybe you're watching online. You can go to gorelevant.com/forthelove. If you want to be a part of this, you can fill out that as well. Maybe you don't have the ability to attend, but you call this church your home and you want to be a part of that, you can go there. But I'm going to ask every person, listen to me, who calls this church their home, you're a follower of Jesus, I'm going to ask you to fill it out. Even if you're going to write 0, have the guts to put it on paper. You say, well, I don't know what I'm going to give, so I'm just going to figure it out. No. Step out into faith and have some accountability in your life. Here's why. In December, we look at our annual budget, which is set by the end of November. We make sure that we're on track going into the new year, and we start making commitments to certain areas across the world, and church plants and foreign missions in different areas. And it's based on how much we're willing to pledge, but also how much we're willing to give in the month of December. So I want to pray over this. And then Brandon's going to sing just a chorus that they wrote as we launched this series last year. And then I'm going to ask you to do me a favor to fill this out. Maybe some of you already have. And don't wait. You can bring your offering, normal tithes and offerings, and you can drop it in the bucket and bring these and drop them in the bucket as well. And then you make your way back to your seat. And if you want to stand at your seat and just kind of worship or sit or whatever, and then we'll close in our time of prayer today. Father, I pray in the next few moments that you would compel us and draw us to be generous and to give radically. And that God, that we wouldn't wait and just say we'll figure it out along the way, but you would lay a nugget in our heart right now. And that you bless this offering and bless this time of commitment to you to make a difference in this community and around the world. Thank you for last year's generosity, but there's more for us to do. And I pray right now we step out in faith in Jesus' name. Amen. Would you fill that out and come as Brandon sings?